between many persons and, of course, the hard work of the staff members and instructors who gather all this great information that we're going to hear this evening. I want to go ahead and give thanks to the University of Puerto Rico, Maya Geese, their extension services and experimental service, the Florida Organic Growers, the University of the Virgin Islands Small Business Development Center and Agriculture Business Center, and Virgin Islands Farmers Alliance, who've all partnered to make this presentation possible this evening. This evening, we're here to discuss soil management practices under organic agriculture production systems. Dr. Julia O'Halloran's soil scientist and researcher with over 30 years of experience in sustainable agriculture. This webinar tonight will focus on effective soil-based management and strategies using organic farming systems, especially relevant for tropical and subtropical environments. Tonight, we will hear a little about cover cropping techniques, nutrient cycling and soil health indicators, ecological strategies for long-term productivity. Okay, and I also want to make note that we do have with us Mr. Dr. Nate Olive, who is with the Virgin Islands Farmers Alliance. Welcome, Dr. Nate Olive. Thank you for attending. Okay, so let's not delay. We are going to get right into it with our speaker, Dr. Julia O'Halloran. You now can take the mic.
Thank you, Shanta. Welcome, everybody. And I would like to recognize that Kendra is here from Florida Organic Growers. Thank you, Kendra. And let us begin. Okay, I always like to start when I give this type of presentation with the question, why is so important to have a good management or fertilization program? And the best answer that I can give when somebody comes up to me and asks is we need to preserve our environment. We need to preserve our natural resources at the same time that we want to have optimum production. Right? We recognize that agriculture is often responsible for being a potential pollution agent. We know that excessive or inappropriate use of, let's say, fertilizer, let's say even organic fertilizer and pesticides can be this agent of pollution. So preventing and reducing preventing contamination will help reduce economic losses due to inappropriate use of these inputs. Okay, and a good nutrient management plan will focus on the amount of nutrients that we need to apply. We need to have determined what would it be close to optimum yields, but also we need to determine the soil nutrient content at the time before we plant. And also we need to keep in mind or evaluate potential environmental problems that we could have at our farms or in the plots that we're planning to plant. In the past, nutrient management always was aimed at maximizing production, not taking into account the environment. But in the present, and by present I mean last 30, 35 years, we are more focused on obtaining economic optimization. By that, we do mean the increasing productivity, but maintaining an economically viable production. And with this, maintaining a healthy environment also. We need to minimize nutrient losses keeping in mind that we want to reduce any environmental pollution and minimizing economic losses, because we know that any pollution to our environment or any consequences on our environment will result and we needing to remediate that problem, and that will mean investing more money in solving the problem that we actually created. We know that deficiency of a nutrient or various nutrients will limit crop development and production. And we also know that excess of nutrients can affect yields and increased risk of contamination. Many farmers, I would like to say the many, okay, some farmers many times come to us and say, well, I have been doing the same things that I always do, and now my yields are, I harvest less, my production is less. The thing is that probably they could be over fertilizing, and everything goes on vegetative growth, and they don't actually produce, they don't get the harvest that they will want and they have in the past. Okay. We have to keep in mind the use of best management practices. Best management practices, or BMPs, apply to conventional agriculture and organic agriculture. First of all, the best practice is to have a soil chemical analysis. Doesn't matter organic or conventional. You need to know what you have in your soil. We need to take into account irrigation management, the application frequency of whatever inputs we are having on our farm, pesticides or conventional or organic fertilizer, doesn't matter. You need to know how frequent you're going to make those applications. You need to know base fertilizer control, or how much is in your soil at that point when you're going to start your planting. You also need what we are going to be discussing today, to know how to use certain practices to improve that soil fertility. In this case, we're going to talk about the use of lime to increase soil fertility. We're going to talk about a little bit about using cover crops, for example, legumes to incorporate nitrogen, and the use of organic sources. Again, maybe this is a little repetitive, but I would like to dig it in so you keep it in mind at all times. Soil fertility management plan on the organic production needs a soil analysis. And what parameters should you ask for when you submit your samples? Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and soil pH. Soil pH is very, very important. Nitrogen, many agronomists do not like to recommend it to be analyzed, because nitrogen is not, it changes, its concentration changes so fast that when you take your sample, once you take it to the lab, what you have in the field is totally different at the result you receive in the mail. I like to recommend, because I like to start with something. If I don't know what I have in my soil, how am I going to decide how much to apply? So it's a starting point. You also need to determine fertilizers, the fertilizer you need, or the amount of organic input you need based on this analysis. If using an organic waste or agricultural waste, it should also be analyzed. Many people just apply compost without knowing if they actually need any of the nutrients that is in the compost, or not knowing how much of nutrients the compost actually is adding to the soil. Another important aspect of the soil chemical analysis is foliar or tissue analysis. I like you to keep in mind that when you analyze for tissue samples, of plant tissue samples, you are not going to solve the result won't give you won't solve the problem. If you have a deficiency, if the analysis shows a deficiency, you cannot solve the problem in this crop cycle. You will solve the problem for the next crop cycle, because once you do the analysis, you have the problem. If you have a deficiency, the problem is already there. So this result will help you solve the problem for the next cycle. Okay, what do we do with the soil and plant tissue analysis? we can optimize plant health and productivity. The soil analysis will reveal any nutrient, soil nutrient composition, either deficiency or excess. Plant tissue analysis, again, will show what the nutrient the plant is actually absorbing and utilizing. And like I said, you can solve the problem the next cropping cycle, not this cycle. You need to, with this analysis, you will identify nutrient deficiency and imbalances, and you can make informed decisions about whatever fertilization practices and other management practices. Okay, let's start talking a little bit about soil pH and the use of lime to adjust the salt acidity. Why I consider soil pH so important? Because here in the tropics, I know in Puerto Rico and I know in the Virgin Islands, there are also some acidic soils. We have most of our soils, not, yeah, a good chunk of our soils are acid. And they are always considered infertile soils, but really they're not infertile soils. They need to be managed in a different way. Okay, many plants thrive in slightly acidic and neutral soils, but some some soils in some regions, the soils are really acidic. So applying lime, which is calcium carbonate or magnesium carbonate, which is the most common sources, help us raise that pH and neutralize the acidity. Usually you neutralize the acidity when you take that pH, which usually is less than 5.5, is considered really acid. You raise it to 6.5 and 7. That is what you would like the soil pH to be. Because in 5.5, and I'm getting too deep into the information here that I want to give you, but below 5.5, the concentration of aluminum is too high, and that is the real problem in acid soils, aluminum concentration. Okay. In nutrient availability, acidic soils can, in some way, imagining that this acid soil lock up essential nutrients like phosphorus, calcium, magnesium. Once you neutralize that acidity, it's like you free those nutrients and they go into the soil solution and they're available for plant uptake. Another aspect or another parameter, soil parameter that is affected by application of lime is that you can improve soil structure, specifically or particularly in clayey soils. Clay soils tend to compact easily. When you apply the lime, you help rebuild that structure, and these soils have you can allow a better root growth and also a better drainage, better movement of liquids through the soil. Microbial activity is also benefited by raising the soil pH because not many soil microorganisms thrive in pHs below 5. Of course, we always have organisms that can live in any environment, but raising pH will increase that activity in microorganisms, which we know it's one of the positive aspects of soil health and soil quality. Another characteristic, in some cases, lime can be used to disinfect, and I put it's not there in quotes, but disinfect should be in quotes, so and reduce the presence of certain parasites and pathogens. It's not widely used, and it's not something that will help in any type of disease, but some diseases can be controlled and reduce the presence of certain parasites. Okay, what type of lime should we use in agriculture? First of all, if you have a organic certified farm, I will recommend you to check with the company that certifies you what it is approved to use, and if the source of lime that you're going to use is in the list of approved materials to use in your farm. Usually what we use, and here in Puerto Rico, we use a lot of limestone. There's a mine here that produces limestone. That's agricultural grade. But also Home Depot, you can find it in Home Depot by little sacks of 50 pounds, maybe 25 pounds. And I've known of people who buy it. Other people buy like the construction lime and use it in the soils. I wouldn't recommend that because it comes with a lot of contaminants. It's not as clean as ag lime, but it's a source. Okay, we have also what it's called dolomitic lime that contains both calcium and magnesium. I've seen it sold as dolomite lime. Here in Puerto Rico, we have what they call like, we haven't, and I hope they never do, mine the dolomitic limes rocks that we have here in the north coast of the island. Uh, but there is some dolomitic lime here in the island, natural. And there's also byproduct lime, is lime that is produced as a byproduct of another industrial processes. In this, and here's the example of water treatment. I work as in I work with a byproduct lime, but in this case, it wasn't calcium carbonate; it was calcium hydroxide, and this was calcium hydroxide was the byproduct of the production of acetylene. It's a company that produces the gas acetylene, and as a byproduct, they have calcium hydroxide. They had a big pond of this material, but it was with a high content of water. And they asked us to do a research and see if it was good as a as a lime source. And it is. Calcium hydroxide is the best source of the for increasing soil pH. The problem with the material is that it's so the particle is so small and it's and so fine that it any type of wind will just blow the material away. And another one is that with the farm workers were complaining that their skin was getting irritated by the material. So it was good for the pH of the soil and solved the problem, but we needed a little more research on how to apply this material so wouldn't be harmful for the farm workers. Okay, so important consideration that we need to think about. Soil testing, it's crucial to test your soil pH and nutrient levels before applying the lime because we need to determine the exact amount that we need because you don't go in there and just throw 2 tons on an acre. No, you have to determine how much you really need. And there are analyses that determine that amount. Another, I would like to add to this that we actually had farmers in the central part of the island where acid soils predominate, and they came to us with the worrying that the soil pH they were not producing, they were not harvesting enough product anymore. They had problem with their, I don't know what the name of the product is. It's chayote. I don't really know what you call it in English. Uh, The thing is that when we went over there and sampled the soil and measured the pH, which normal levels are supposed to be around 5.5 to 6, the pH was in 7 and 8. So when we asked them, what have you been doing? And I wouldn't be doing anything different. We keep applying the same amount of lime every year. And I looked at them and said, every year for how many years? And they said, well, since my father started the farm. And he was an old man, so for a long time. I said, okay, well then you have to stop. You will not grow the amount that the harvest that you used to have. So you have to wait. You have to leave it rest and wait, or leave it and follow and wait and see what happens. So that's what they've been doing, trying to decrease the soil pH decrease to its natural levels. It will go back to its natural levels because the soil has something called buffer capacity. So it will go back to its natural level, but it will take time. So that's the story about overlining. You have to be careful that it's so easy to go above what you actually need. Okay, so we have in Puerto Rico, there have been research done on soil pH from the 1930s to the 2000s. That's one subject that has been studied as much as nitrogen. This is just one example of how important liming is to acid soils. This is a soil, it's an multi-soil in the mountainous region of Puerto Rico. It's a sort of corosal clay. And what this researcher was trying to do is establish what amount of carbonate was necessary to raise soil pH to a limit where they could neutralize exchangeable aluminum. In this table, we see the effect of that increasing amounts of calcium carbonate can increase soil pH, and there's significant differences about among treatments, and the effect on the yield. Uh, Fresh yield, which is the pods, the green beans, the actual green beans, and the last column is the dry beans or the grains per se. So you can see all of them had a constant increase in weight with increasing amount of calcium carbonate. In this, then we can see an example of that same experiment. We can see a photo of the zero treatment or control treatment, smaller pods, less pods, and the color is kind of yellowish of the leaves. And you compare it to the 10 tons per hectare calcium carbonate, bigger pods, more pods, the leaves are greener. So you can actually see the effect that the calcium carbonate has on the plant. And the last thing I want to touch here, talking about soil pH and aluminum concentration. This is the ultrasol they use, the corosal clay, and you can see the concentration of aluminum all the way up there, 6 to 7 centimole per kilogram. That is excessively high. But you see, as the pH increases, the aluminum concentration decreases. It comes out of the soil solution and is precipitated, and it's that now the plant, it's not available to the plant. This doesn't affect plant growth. However, if the pH for any reason comes back down, the concentration of aluminum will come back up. So applying calcium carbonate will decrease that concentration of aluminum, but eventually, and this is due to the buffer capacity of the soil, aluminum concentration will again go up. Okay, now I'm going to switch subjects here a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about farm animal waste. I'm not going to go in detail in the table. I just want you to see that not all animal waste are the same. They have different nutrient concentration. We have here dairy cattle, beef cattle, pork, broiler chickens, and laying hens. They all have different concentration of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Dairy cattle presents the highest concentration of nitrogen, and the less concentration is in pork production. They have the less nitrogen concentration. So if you have a dairy farm near you, it will be in your best interest to go there and try to get a couple of buckets of that manure to prepare your compost. And because the compost, when you use some animal manure, that it will be the best quality because it will have the highest nutrient concentration. This was a study that we did in the 1990s. It was not really an experiment. It was just an evaluation. We wanted, since in the 1990s, it was the highest peak of chicken broiler production in Puerto Rico. There were a lot of farms dealing with broiler chicken production. At that time, they had a problem with disposing of all this material, all this manure. So the Junta de Calidad Ambiental, which is the state agency in charge of policy, they allow the farmers to bury the material for a period up to 24 months, 2 years. The problem was that they didn't know, even though it's a compost process, even if you bury it, it goes through a compost process. They didn't know how would it affect nutrient concentration of this material. So we did take some samples of the fresh material, 2-month-old material, and material that had been buried for 24 months. And we evaluated nitrogen concentration, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and aluminum. As you can see, nitrogen decreased significantly from the fresh to the 21-month-old. That is to expect because nitrogen volatilizes really easily and it's lost easily. However, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, and magnesium practically, in some instances, increase, in others, it just stayed the same, which is positive because only phosphorus present a problem with potential contamination if it reaches surface water or underground water. What I will really what I was really concerned was with the concentration of aluminum that it went up to 12, almost 13 parts per million when it originally was in 2000, close to 3000. Uh, Probably it has to do also with the soil pH. With it hasn't been measured in this in this study, so we have to take into consideration what the effect of the compost process is going to have on the nutrients that we are interested in using as fertilization. So all process that we do on the manure or whatever material we're going to use on the soil is affected by time, by storage, etc. Let's talk a little bit about compost, and let's start with a definition. Compost is a mixture of materials or ingredients that are used as fertilizer to improve soil physical, chemical, and biological properties. It's commonly prepared by decomposing these materials, and the process could take from 3 months to 6 months, depending on the climatic conditions, humidity, for example, or the content, water content of the material. Has different parameters that we need to take into consideration. But when we were working with composting in Puerto Rico, the lowest time that we thought that it was ready, 3 months. And there's a high humidity here in Puerto Rico, a lot of rain, and the temperature is really high most of the year. What are the benefits of composting? Well, we know that it enriches the soil and builds up a healthy soil, which is what we are striving for when we are working with organic agriculture. It improves nutrient management. I will get to the questions in a minute. And suppresses, like we said before, suppresses some weed, pests, and diseases, and promotes healthier plant growth. Other positive or benefits of composting: reduces erosion, conserves water, reduces reliance on chemical fertilizer and pesticides. Also, it combats climate change because you're retaining in the soil all your organic carbon. So by retaining in the soil the organic carbon, sequestering that organic carbon is not in your environment, and it protects against climate change in a way. Also has economic benefits because you are reducing the amount of synthetic fertilizer that you're using. So of course it will be, unless you have to pay much more for your ingredients to prepare the compost. But I really believe that preparing compost is just so much cheaper than buying synthetic or fertilizers. And of course, increases crop yields. Of course, you need to make sure that you apply the amount that you actually need and that you manage it properly. That is, dividing it in time, is determining at what time during the crop growth you actually need the compost or the nutrients. Should I answer questions now, Shanta, or should I continue changing subjects?
I think it's just best if a question is pertaining to the current topic, Dr. O'Halloran would answer. If not, we'll address any other questions at the end of the segment.
Okay, I'll answer it at the end of the segment. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the cover crops. Cover crops are plants that are planted, which is kind of redundant, but that to cover the soil. They're not necessarily planted to harvest. Cover crops manage soil erosion, can help in soil fertility, improve soil quality. Again, it improves water usage, water drainage, and retention and water retention. It controls weeds, pests, and other diseases, and improve biodiversity of the soil. And with biodiversity of the soil, I mean microorganisms and bigger organisms because we need them all to have a healthy soil environment. These are some examples of effective cover crops that we have used here in Puerto Rico. My favorite is sun hemp, just because the flower is beautiful. There's also sunflower, favorite of many, and there's a sample of sesame. Sesame is funny because I was in the field once, in a field of sesame, and it smelled like this candy that you, the sesame candy, but I couldn't connect the two. And why does it smell like candy? And I'm in the field, and my student just looked at me and said, "It's sesame." Oh, okay, okay. Now I get it. So it smells when the sun is hitting it and it's kind of hot. You can smell the candy, the sesame candy, ajonjolí. So here's another a view of photos of other cover crops that we have evaluated here in Puerto Rico. I like to separate them in types like legumes, grasses, brassicas, and broadleaf. And I'll tell you why in a little bit because I'm going to talk a little bit about what we actually did here in Puerto Rico. They all have different use different. It's very important to use different types of cover crops because each one has or benefits the soil in a different way. We have the legumes that obviously has have to do with nitrogen fixation, so it gives nitrogen to the soil, or it could give nitrogen to the soil. And we have the grasses that, because of the root system, once the plant dies, that root system stays in the soil and becomes organic matter. And we have the brassicas, which help in, they're like radish is the best example that opens up the soil and had forms some forms like little roads inside the soil that can hit the soil. Sorry, the soil will help in water movement through the soil and better penetration of the roots also. Then broadleaf, they also good for increasing organic matter in the soil. My one of my graduate students, Annalise, she evaluated the use of cover crops seed mixtures on soil physical, chemical, and biological properties. What I mean with seed mixtures is that it wasn't just one plant or one type of seed for plant. It was a mixture of different seeds. We evaluated 3 different mixtures. Here you have the plants. There were some that were the same in the 3 mixtures, but they all had a different combination of seeds. We wanted to evaluate this to see if there was a difference in soil parameters depending on the seed mixture. Results show that only organic carbon, which is the shade in gray, and RB is basal respiration, which is indirect method of microorganism activity. So organic carbon showed a difference in the control. The organic carbon was lower when compared to the seed mixtures. So even though there wasn't difference between mixtures treatments, there was a difference between the control treatment where no cover crop was planted and the rest of the treatments and the cover crop treatments. The same thing we can observe in the microorganism activity. In the control treatment, the activity was lower when compared to the treatments where we had cover crops. So this is evidence that they actually, yes, improve soil parameters. The thing is that if you want to have this effects, long-lasting effects, you have to keep planting this plant continuously. You need to do it year over year, and eventually in a period of 3, 4, 5 years, you will actually see it and reap those benefits. This is a period of only 12 months because it's an experiment. So it's more difficult to pinpoint exactly the results or the effect on the soil parameters. A second experiment was done in 2021 with another graduate student, Adriana Rivera Alejandro. We were here evaluating each cover crop individually. We didn't plant mixture of seeds. It was individual plots of individual plants. There were 13 plants evaluated. And like I said, we divided in legumes, grasses, broadleaf, and brassicas. And here it was pretty interesting because we saw an effect on bulk density, which is a soil physical property. Again, the highest bulk density was observed in the brassicas. This plant is not doesn't have that much biomass when compared to the others. So when compared to the legumes, grasses, and broadleaf, so the effect on bulk density is going to be less. We also had an effect of nitrogen, nitrogen, and of course, the principal effect is on legumes because of nitrogen fixation. And also, we had an effect of the microorganism activity. We saw a higher activity in the brassicas and the broadleaf. I was surprised by this because I was expecting a greater activity in the nitrogen in the legumes, but it was surprised to see that it was in the brassicas. So we have to dig a little bit more into that to see what exactly is happening there. We also, another part of this project was evaluating how the incorporation of the material will affect certain parameters. And in this case, we saw that the incorporation of the material had effect on the electrical conductivity, which is an indirect measurement of calcium, magnesium, potassium concentration in the soil. And we saw that with increasing incorporation, and what I said, third incorporation, is we let the crop grow 3 times. So the third incorporation means that it was the third crop incorporated a third time. So with 3 times of incorporation of the material, the electrical conductivity was significantly reduced, which is something positive, especially if you have soils with high electrical conductivity like the vertisols have. Organic carbon in this case showed an increased concentration of organic carbon with 1 incorporation and with 3 incorporations. So that is also a positive effect. In terms of nitrogen, we saw also an increase in nitrogen concentration with 3 incorporations. No effect was observed in the microorganism activity. We have to keep in mind that a sustainable soil system, and this is a little piece of a bigger information received from Altieri and Nichols, published in 2000. Sustainable soil system is based on its ability to provide and retain and recycle water, nutrients that are necessary for the development of plant of animals. And I like to say, well, also we benefit, the humans benefit from all this. So we also have to keep in mind that, again, this is, I already presented this slide before, but we want economic optimization. By increasing productivity, we want to keep our production economically viable. We want to maintain a healthy environment by reducing environmental pollution, but minimizing economic loss. Economic losses either by losing our crops, and that's why we have soil management and soil fertility management and soil fertility plans, and we take care of our environment because remediating a problem caused by our inability to protect our environment will have consequences not only again in our environment but in our pockets also. So here we are. If you have any question, feel welcome. The mic is open so you can ask. I will start with the first one by Nate. Can Virgin Island farmers get soil tested in Puerto Rico? If not, where do you recommend it sent from U.S. Virgin Islands? We have the University of Puerto Rico has a lab that receives samples, soil samples for analysis for a charge. The only problem is that since I guess everybody has personnel limitations these days, it takes a long time. So here in Puerto Rico, I particularly send my samples from my, if I can analyze them in the lab, I send them to a lab in the United States in Tennessee. It's called Waypoint. I recommend it. They're really good. And they have, you can choose if you're like me and you have a particular type of analysis that you want to be done on those samples, you can ask them and they will provide the sample, of course, for a cost. It's $52 for a sample that includes phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, pH, and nitrate. Those all those for $52. Anything else you have to add, and it's usually $12 each analyte, additional analyte. Any other questions?
Thank you for that. Thank you.
A long answer for a short question, I know.
Dr. O'Halloran, in your expert opinion, do you think it's better between crops that farmers do the crop cover overs or just let the fields set vacant and just like,
And
give them
follow?
nutrients?
Well, it depends. Uh, Sometimes selecting a cover crop with a specific, when you have something specific that you want for that plot of soil, you can select a specific cover crop and plant it and take care of the cover plot. Of course, maybe you won't have to fertilize it, but you have to manage it. When it's in fallow, you just let it grow and you just don't take care of it. Just leave it until you're ready to put up to production. In both cases, organic matter is going to increase because they both have biomass and they're both improve organic carbon content, will improve organic carbon content. But let's say you will like it to have to increase the nitrogen content of that soil. Well, it's best if you plant a legume and you incorporate it into the soil before that pod develops. Because if you wait until the pod develops, all the nitrogen goes to the pod. So if you incorporate that plant before that seed development, you will increase and you will improve nitrogen content in that soil. So you have to think, what is that actually I want to do? What is my objective?
Very interesting.
Okay, thank you very much for that response. Do we have any questions? You can unmute yourselves and go ahead and ask the question or just put it in the chat for those of you who are shy, and I'll read it out
Yeah.
to Dr. Hilleran and then we'll proceed from there. Oh, one other thought that came to mind is about
Also,
erosion. Erosion.
Nate, I wondered if he wanted to talk a little bit about soils in Virgin Islands, because my knowledge of the soils of Virgin Islands is limited, but I know Nate has more information, so he can elaborate a little bit more on that.
Okay, very well. Well, Dr. Ali will give you the floor to speak about the soils and the Virgin Islands.
Great. Thank you.
Let me stop sharing.
Yeah, well, and you did, Shay, you had a good question about erosion there, I believe. Can you continue with that question?
Yes, I was thinking about erosion. What was the best or the best method to prevent erosion, or the best
Oh,
crop
okay.
that you would hold, plants to hold your soil?
You want to answer? Should I answer? Uh, okay, erosion.
Go ahead.
Okay, it depends on where the erosion is actually, but in agriculture plots, for example, uh, they have they have what they call terraces that NRCS, the Natural Resources and Conservation Service, they have many practices that they can help the farmer establish in their farm if there are difference in topography and if that is the limitation. But when it's something that you can control on your own, certain plants can help you control that the soil doesn't keep giving way. Like for example, a lot of people use vetiver, uh, and I don't know if that you know that name. And for example, here in Puerto Rico, in some places, the municipal government have planted vetiver with that purpose, because when they're built like bridges or overpass or whatever, the soil kind of loosens up in that area, and it slows down the plant growth, kind of slows down. So they decided to plant this vetiver, which has a really profuse root system that develops really, really fast and controls that the soil doesn't keep giving way and erode. You can add on a little bit more if you want to, a little more information, Nate, if you have it.
Oh, I agree completely. Vetiver is amazing, especially because it doesn't get out of control. And there is a vetiver project in the Virgin Islands. It's territory wide. They've been having workshops and distributing vetiver starts, and they can
Mm-hmm.
be planted along the contour line. Um, I think the most important thing is any kind of plant.
Yeah,
Like having
that's true.
complete coverage, roots in the ground, holding that soil together, and allowing even some overgrowth and more organic matter to slow down the water flow,
Mm-hmm.
and hold the soil together in general, of course, um, but also roots. There's trees in the Virgin Islands that have, wide, breadfruit is a good tree for erosion because its roots go laterally and
Mm-hmm.
shallow along the surface. They really hold the soil together. Where some of our native trees like Ceiba pintanda, that is, the ceiba tree or upside down tree. That thing, I've seen it hold back mountains. I mean, it's just got, it's so like, 6 feet of soil behind these huge buttress roots. You can really see what it does in the gut and waterways in the Virgin Islands holding back. Yeah, so there's a lot of things, but the most important thing is to have plants and not
Mm-hmm.
just have bare soil.
Not the bear soil.
Okay, thank you for that. And before we move on, Dr. Nate Olive, we have one question. I guess this may be directed at you, Dr. O'Halloran. What species of cover crops would you recommend for fruit tree and small ruminant mix production?
Well, for fruit trees, anything that doesn't compete too much with the trees. I mean, because you're going to have something growing next to the trees and you don't want it to competing for nutrients. um I know that in, oh, I forgot the name of the the crop, but in Sabana Grande there is a farmer that has cover crops with his banana trees, and it's been going okay. This he does it's he said that he hasn't seen any type of competition, and his production is has stayed the same. I don't remember the name of the cover crop. I really don't remember. If anybody in the audience remembers that name, please share it. In terms of small ruminant mix production, you have to be careful because you want something that allows for it to be nutrient for the animal. I mean, I was talking about this with Dr. Aponte, and he gave a webinar last Tuesday, and we are trying to put up a project here in Gurabo uh, that has to do with like increasing protein, establishing mixtures of pastures of legumes with grasses so the animals can pasture, but it has to be the good combination of material of plants so the animals can stay healthy. So that going to depend on the type of soil that you have. Is going to depend the type of animal that you're trying to I don't know that in your enterprise, and it also has to depend on what is available in the market because not all plants are available all the time. So if you're actually thinking about doing this, I'll just recommend you to contact your extension agent or contact Dr. Aponte here in the Agriculture Experiment Station in Gurabo, and he will help you determine which one is the best for your case.
Okay, thank you for that response, Dr. Hellerens. Dr. Nate Olive, you have the floor.
Great. I think, is there a way I could get control to share some slides here?
How do I
thought I
get
saw
control?
I thought I saw a take control icon earlier that I don't see anymore.
Don't you have the share button?
Up at the top right, is it allowing you to share, Dr. Olive?
Oh, there we go. Okay,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
Okay, looks like I have to allow it. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Oh,
Okay, we're seeing what's on your screen. Yes.
okay, great. So let's see. Okay, so and I realize that first of all, thank you so much, Dr. Julia, for the amazing information. I really enjoyed that. And you asked me to share a little bit about the soils in the Virgin Islands. So I said, well, I'll get one slide together. Now I have 10 slides and we have 8 minutes. But also, if we could stay a little longer for questions, if there are some, this has been great so far. So let me just go through these real quick first of all, my name is Nate Olive. I am a president of the Virgin Island Farmers Alliance. I'm an organic farmer here in the Virgin Islands, certified organic Ridge to Reef Farm. I'm also a member of the local Farm and Food Council, along with Shanta, Ms. Roberts here, in the Virgin Islands. We're implementing the territory's agriculture plan, and organic is a part of that. So without further ado, soils in the Virgin Islands. And she already mentioned that there's, environmental degradation that's possible from unsustainable farming. This slideshow, and you'll be able to watch this later, I believe, it's being recorded. So you could see the dead zones that are happening from nitrification of our oceans. This is killing our fish supply. Very important. Look into that. It's a major problem, and it's not very well published or talked about. And also organic farming, in addition to, healthy food and healthy environment, it's a good way to make money. You can see this table here and how much the industry has grown, and being certified organic can carry extra dollars. And I know that because I sell my stuff, a lot of it certified organic, for, make more money on it. Sometimes I don't make more money on it. Local is pretty strong itself, but especially if you're going to export crops or make products with them. Organic soils in the Virgin Islands, versus conventional soils, or just in general, organic versus conventional soils. Organic soil is full of life. That's basically the difference. And conventional soils are generally not as full of life. So organic soil can have a billion microorganisms, several billion, more than a ton of bacteria per acre. And you can see the makeup of organic soil there, and all the soil food web, all the animals that live through there. You can watch this later and look up all the details in the slide. The soil organic matter is that little sliver there in between the air and water and mineral particles that make up soil. And the organic matter percent that's where organic farming, that's what it's all about right there. These organisms, the residues and byproducts and protected organic matter, which holds the soil together and is encapsulated in the soil, providing pockets of nutrition and in the soils. And you can see here that this is just generally the soil particles and how water clings to the clay, and the soil organic matter is really important for regulating the everything, and with water regulation. And here in the Virgin Islands, I'm going to get to this in just a minute. You'll see the different problems that we have, and so it also will increase your capacity uh, in the environment for production and for root penetration. When you have healthy soil versus soil that's broken down, you have all these air pockets, the water can be retained and all those things. So it's basically a nice natural structure for the soil. And here in the Virgin Islands, this is what I'm here for, is to talk about a little bit about the soil. As you can see, the soil orders, which she was mentioning, what is there in Puerto Rico. And if I want to go to St. Croix, if you look at the vertisol soils there, and I put a little key in there so you can understand what these orders mean. And vertisols are the shrinking and swelling clay soils. If you look at that yellow on St. Croix, you notice, if you're familiar with St. Croix, that is the agricultural area. That area is where a lot of the farms are, and partly that's because it's not good to build on. It's kind of the soil that was left, but it also has generally lower acidity, or I'm sorry, well, a higher pH, I should say, than some of the other soils that you find around the island, like where Ridge to Reef Farm is up in the northwest corner there, and there's the molsols, which are soft grassland soils. But now it's becoming more forested in the whole rainforest region, since there's less pasture for the Senepol cattle and other cattle. That all those 4,000 acres used to be all cattle. So it's changing kind of from the grassland soils to more of the forest soils, which is not reflected in this. But that's building new soil. But generally, the soils there's two main types, at least in St. Croix. You have the mountainous soils, and then you have the flatland soils, to say it really, simply. And in the Victory complex type soils up in the mountains, they really break down, and they're not holding their integrity as easily as the more clay heavy soils in the flat areas. And she was talking about the calcium carbonate. And as you know, like the geologic history of St. Croix is an uplifted island. So a lot of those flat shelves where agriculture is, where the UVI is, those are actually old seabeds risen up from the floor when St. Croix appeared 136 million years ago in the Pacific Ocean. Don't believe me? Look it up. It's amazing. But so there's a lot of calcium carbonate there. It's a great place to grow vegetables. If you're up in the mountains, you need to have more care, or the steeps of St. Thomas and St. John. And I want to say hello to our friends in British Virgin Islands. I know at least one is here tonight. You have soils that are going to break down more quickly. And so a lot of these practices that she was talking about are more important to implement. And you really got to take care of your soil, or you're going to lose your productivity and your pH is going to drop. Like she said, they tend to get acidic quickly instead of the alkaline. And a lot of like she mentioned, the aluminum and those kind of things. So these have already been mentioned, but I just want to make this list here of ways to grow soil. This picture is just a few days ago, and we were talking about crotalaria and the nitrogen production. That is, those little nodules are nitrogen forming on this young crotalaria plant. There's a zucchini patch behind it. And this plot has had cover crop in it for 2 years. It's been in fallow. It was one of our most used areas on the farm. And we've had cover crop after cover crop, mostly with crotalaria. And so far the results in this first crop is just amazing. It's like a whole new field, and I know this field really well. And so putting soils to rest is a really great way. That's number 3, fallows, and the cover crops, which we're talking about now. And she had a great presentation, so don't need to go into that. Reduce tilling or don't till at all. Build up the compost, build the top of the soil. Challenge is keeping it loose. So there's strategies to do that, but you can look into that. And composting and manure has been mentioning, and also rotational grazing, regenerative agriculture, bringing animals in. Sometimes those footprints also make, like the radishes that were mentioned earlier, that make channels for water to penetrate the soil. So do hoof prints. And so with diligent rotational grazing and not letting them graze in the same spot, then you can receive the benefits of manure and have that as a part of your fallowing system, where you could switch it to another economic use, which would be animals, and rotate them in and out of pasture. You could do that with electric fencing or other ways. So real quick, if you're interested in becoming organic certified, here I am with a Transition to Organic program representing the Virgin Islands with our partner in Puerto Rico. And we have technical assistance and mentoring program available for you to become certified organic. We're focusing in the Virgin Islands, in the U.S., in the Puerto Rico, but organic is a worldwide thing. If you're in the British Virgin Islands, you could also become certified organic. So, but the steps are basically to start using organic practices, stop non-compliant, develop a transitional plan, select a certifier, have an inspection, and you get your certificate. If the land hasn't been used for a long time, it could happen very quickly. If it has been used with some non-compliant reason, then it will take 3 years to transition. So this is our website, Virgin Island Farmers Alliance. Here's some of the initiatives we've been doing in the Virgin Islands. And if you're interested in mentoring, you can reach out to Emily. If you're in Puerto Rico or the Virgin Islands or anywhere in the U.S., reach out to Emily at foginfo.org, and she will tell you about the mentoring program. And if you're going to do that, do it quickly, because we're almost to the point where that won't be, I believe, taking new people for too long. And also reach out to us in the Virgin Islands if you'd like some technical assistance. I can help answer your questions on a one-on-one basis, or visit your farm at info@vifarmers.org. So thank you for the time. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to turn it back over. I'm not sure
If you
how
could just
to.
leave that for 1 second more, let those who need to get the information,
Yes.
jot it down really quick, so that you can,
Yes. Thank you. And we're
and
on
I
Facebook.
tested
Virgin
Dr.
Islands.
Alif's fields. I've been out there twice. You don't know I've been out there, but I've been out there. And what he has going out there, Rich DeReese, is really awesome and great things. And I really urge you, because you can really taste the difference in the food that comes when it's organic. You can really taste the quality and the difference in the food. Okay. We thank you, Dr. For showing us and presenting with us. If there are any questions for Dr. Ali, you could drop them in a chat. Again, if you're shy, or go ahead and unmute yourself and ask him directly.
Or comments.
Well, you're just awesome. You left them speechless.
I don't know. I heard people are supposed to ask questions.
Yeah, you left them really speechless.
At least 7 o'clock.
Okay, Dr. Halloran, do you want to wrap up with any final parting words, as I'm still just checking the chat to make sure we don't have any latecomers?
Well, I'd like to thank everyone for being here tonight. I know that it's a different time than usually we do webinars or do presentations. Thank you, Nate, for being available, and your presentation on our Virgin Island soils. I learned a lot today about them. So we are going to have more webinars along the line here with the Virgin Islands. I'm sorry, I forgot the name of your organization.
It's the Agriculture Business Center, which is a small business development center. And then you have Dr. Olive, who's the Virgin Islands Farmers Alliance. So
we'll see each other again in August. We'll have 2 new webinars. So keep
Ye-
in touch and pay attention on your social pages.
Yes, and I encourage those who tell a friend, share the information, share, to those you think may be interested. And we again, thank you again for showing up, and thanks again to Dr. Halloran and Dr. Day Ali for presenting their information. We learned a lot, and so now the knowledge that you gained here, we hope you go and apply it. And everyone have a good night. We'll see you at the next presentations.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night,
See you next
everyone.
time.